start recording on my end too.
Recording in progress.
Welcome back to, for the first time actually, so welcome. The Subcritical. What's it called? Jcritical. What are we doing here, man? What can we tell the people?
We're just hanging out, trying out Reach Metaverse, seeing how this is. They built this awesome little podcasting studio, and we're just kind of checking it out today.
Honestly, it looks really cool, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's fun.
And this isn't the first time we've done this. And, well, in Reach, this isn't the first time because we tested, kind of had a run through with CJ, but we've been doing some VR stuff prior.
Yeah, we tried out a different platform, VR chat. We tried out Facebook's or Meta's new Horizon worlds. So we've been in a few.
And this is exciting to me because it's branded as, us instead of VR BS, which is what the podcaster said. I'm not really sure who owned that or who made that, but it's kind of cool. So in this sort of podcast, we're doing kind of this weekly, maybe bi-weekly. We'll be trying to update people as we go on basically just Cardano news, Cardano stories, Cardano storytelling, and education. Is that fair to say? DeFi, Cnfts, Metaverse concepts, Subcritical?
Yeah, I think we'll be covering just about everything. Obviously, there's a lot going on, so maybe we won't cover everything at once, but over time.
What's kind of nice, too, is I think we have potential to build out a roster. Obviously, having CJ in the corner there is pretty cool. Just in case, something goes wrong or we need his help or he wants to chime in.
Hey, you always got to have tech support. What can I say?
But yeah, man, guests potentially. So anyways, it's fun seeing other projects doing this. I know Cornucopias has the Kopi Cafe, but I think it's kind of cool for content creators to do it because there's this purity of content creators creating shows on all these different projects that I think projects just, even if they try to stay as neutral as possible, there is always going to be a bias. There's always going to be they're trying to tell their story too and advocate, what's kind of going on in their ecosystem. But what we're trying to do is offer additionally just more information. Is that fair to say, Subcritical?
Yeah, that sounds pretty fair to me.
So dude, how have you been, man? Our VR plans died because we were recording a podcast on in VR, and your audio didn't come through, and it was probably our best show ever.
Are you still there? I thought you were mid-sentence.
Oh no! I was just waiting to see your reaction.
Yeah, I was pretty bummed that it didn't work out, man. I saw the mic thing moving, so I thought we were good, but I guess I had it muted or something, and the source wasn't coming through. That was a big bummer. But I think around that time we just started discussing, and we were like, maybe we'll take a break from this, because I think we were both doing a lot around that time. And I think things have slowed down a bit, and I got to take a little bit of a break. That was kind of nice.
And I think there was this intrinsic, we want to keep creating content, but we wanted to maybe discover different venues and ways to do it. So that's the short story. But in recent weeks since that period of time, man, what have you thought about Cardano? So much has happened recently. What have you been spending your time doing? And what kinds of trends have you noticed that may have surprised you or may have just not surprised you?
Yeah, I think you, just been kind of mostly watching. There's been a lot of Metaverse stuff coming out, Reach. There's also Cornucopias did some sales, and Pavia keeps releasing new information. So there's a lot going on in the Metaverse. Seems like those projects are all still building. And then when it came to DeFi, everybody's been kind of on a waiting period while they were waiting for Basel, which you and I talked about before, where we both thought it was going to be delayed, and it did end up getting delayed. So now we're just waiting till next month, where all these new projects, or projects that have been around for a while, will actually be able to implement. So that's just what I'm starting to get into more, is looking into those. And then I think one of the biggest news things I saw lately was that Sunday Swap card starter. It looks like that legal stuff is finally coming to a conclusion based on the information I saw recently.
Oh, really? Now, what is that conclusion looking like, by the way?
It's looking like it's just going to be dismissed. That card starter didn't really have a case. They couldn't present any information that would force Sunday Swap to either give them anything, or Sunday Swap to do something for those C-Swap holders, which looks pretty sad for, I guess, the holders. But card starter themselves, I haven't even seen them really post since like May on Twitter. So I don't even know if they're actually active in this community. I know they also had a launch pad on Solana, but I don't know how well they're doing over there.
Yeah, that stuff is interesting. So it sounds like a conclusion's coming. I guess that's healthy. What is really interesting in the DeFi space for me is all these developers, playing around with Vassal and just it seems like I haven't seen too much on like any new toolings being developed, but I have heard from a couple of devs that based on being on testnet, like there isn't really any major issues with putting into place their previous plans, like for projects that are using synthetics or lending and have liquidations, and things are moving along really smooth. I also hear from the NFT ecosystem players that a lot of work is being done with things like Lucid and leveraging that on testnet. I think that's where Wild Tangs, which I'll be speaking to Monday on my Twitter space, they're really leveraging Lucid and Vassal for the Vassal testnet to create some insanely interesting tooling for NFTs and functionalities for NFTs. So it's funny how Vassal has, opened up the door for a lot of the plans for DeFi projects, but it's also, to me, allowing uncharted territories for what NFTs can do. That's kind of my take on it. What's your take on that similar? It's always hard to ask these questions. I don't know how to ask it. What's your take on what I just said?
Yeah, I think the Vassal hard fork is going to have a lot more implications than we've seen. I know I've talked to other people around, and we all feel like there's a lot more that can happen after it, but we can't really say what it is. It's like adding new technology, and you don't really know exactly, but we know there's innovations happening. And it's cool to hear that NFT projects are going to be implementing some stuff with that, which is kind of what I'm excited to see, because I feel like NFTs need to grow more. I've just been seeing a lot of the same like profile pic stuff and like no real new innovations. But it was interesting to see, that Lucid is getting used by different projects. So I'll have to get more info on that from you.
I think one of the things that I'm looking at too is we have a lot of data on some of the DeFi projects that have been building in the space. So they're starting to look like, I think there's been enough time. And obviously, this is, I'm going to contradict myself here because we're still so early, but there's been enough time for a little bit of I don't know, dispersion to kind of happen. You know what I mean? Like dispersion is when a certain genre is, has different companies in it. And there's like the top, 5 or even the top 3 are just so far ahead than the rest of the players in that genre. Not saying that the rest of the players can't be successful, but I think some dispersion has taken place. Like when we think of lending protocols, I don't know about you, but I think about Liquid, I think about Meld. When I think of synthetics, I obviously think about Indigo. Obviously, Genius is like an ecosystem of DeFi products. So that's interesting. There's a few actual ecosystems of DeFi projects. I think even ViFi is trying to become an ecosystem. So that's interesting to me. But there's like these household names maybe. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so the biggest name I see right now is like Maladex everywhere, just based on I think a lot of people were impressed with their white paper, and now we're
They
hoping to
read
see
it.
them. Yeah, we're hoping to see them implement some things. Uh, so yeah, I'm hoping after the Vossel hard fork that they'll actually be ready to implement. I haven't heard them set any dates or anything. They just kind of kept saying they were waiting for that. And then yeah, obviously Genius Yield will be coming out once the Vossel hard fork comes out. So I mean, hopefully by the end of August we have a few of these platforms up and running. But we'll kind of wait and see what happens there.
When I think about investors looking at DeFi projects, I think that there's this element of you almost have to be a little bit careful because, like, how do you invest into a DeFi project, right? There's yield farming, there's just buying the tokens, and just because the project is used and great doesn't always necessarily mean that the token will appreciate. Um, or the farming rewards will do well over time. So there's this education that's kind of needed and research that's needed too to understanding the tokenomics of these individual DeFi projects because even if something's a household name, if it is inflating its token supply and giving it out as rewards, your bag might be devalued over time if you're not paying attention.
Yeah, that's definitely something that happens because you can see like Sunday Swap. I think on the 19th, they're not going to be giving out any rewards anymore, like Sunday wise, for people who are providing liquidity. People are going to have to vote again on that. But do people really want to vote in for more Sunday to get out there? Because it's already like a ton and everybody's kind of been devalued and it's been sold off. It's like it needs like a consolidation period. But I don't know, without that incentive on the platform, are they going to lose a ton of TVL while people move to other platforms? I'm not really sure. So it's I don't know, it's kind of a weird balance and like a battle out there for people to get more users on their platform.
Yeah, yeah. Well, who knows, man? Maybe some of those dexes will want to sponsor this podcast and put their brand there so they can subliminally hack into people's brains. Um, Obviously, kind of joking, kind of not, but nonetheless, when you think about so let me ask you this: what would be kind of cool too is because I just remembered this tweet, which would be fun to show, but when like that'd be kind of a cool thing for us to do too, CJ, is like have like a I don't know if we could have like a screen and have like a slideshow prepared to like kind of show different tweets and stuff. That'd be really fun.
Oh,
That'd
yeah.
be pretty cool.
That's doable. We can work on getting that for next time. If there's a tweet you want, I can actually just probably pull it up and put it on screen somewhere.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it right now, but it was just kind of like a Twitter thread that I was in with Riley and Indigo James, and essentially it was about this kind of idea of commodities being fiscally healthy if we could peg commodities in a very safe way to tokens and have these like synthetic commodities because as we're what I like to do is I like to look at macro finance a lot. Like that's a huge passion of mine. So I'm rereading Ray Dalio's Changing World Order book for the second time, and it is interesting looking forward how commodities will probably do pretty well. Um, it's weird though in some regards when we look at commodities because they've already kind of done pretty well, but they have a lot of room to go, and where I think it's interesting is if you could somehow create a synthetic that pegs to a commodity and makes sense, without owning the commodities, without the project having to purchase said commodities. So I was just asking if that could be done, and Riley and Indigo James were indicating that it could be in this Twitter thread as long as something was done on Indigo's side. So I was just thinking about that, and I'm not sure how it gets done. I'm gonna be researching that a bit more and asking more questions because it needs to be done super safely. So I don't know. Any thoughts on that, Subcritical?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely something that a lot of people are looking into, and they want more commodities and things like that on like the blockchain and using it here as like tokens and trading. And I don't know, getting into the whole synthetic side. I'm hoping to see a lot more innovation once Indigo is actually here. Maladex is going to have some synthetics and things like that too. So I don't know. It's just something we just gotta kind of wait and see what all these people do.
So DeFi, things are kind of getting interesting, I would say, for Cardano DeFi. There's a lot of VCs that have taken bets in other platforms, and maybe they're down on those bets. Maybe there's a lot of institutional investors getting that haven't taken bets yet, and maybe are waiting for the market to bottom or collapse before they start. I do think Cardano was neglected by probably a good amount of institutional players who invested in other ecosystems. So the narrative that would be hopium for DeFi people is that once we get through Vassal hard fork, we could see a rebalance of value across industry where Cardano DeFi projects that have that sort of what I could see potentially happening, that's hopium, of course, I'll preface, so don't take it as gospel, is this kind of cross-industry rebalancing. Oh, wow, Cardano is actually a player. These DeFi protocols, they're about to get up and started. Once people realize we better get in early before that happens. And maybe we'll see more activity happening for investing in DeFi.
Yeah, we'll definitely see what happens. 'Cause I know what, like, Three Arrows was invested in Ardana, and like that has kind of come down a lot in price. But there are other projects, I guess, that the value of it had gone down quite a bit, like with all their dexes. And then we'll have Liquid coming out, which you could say is like equivalent of like what, Aave. And what it's at, like $26 a token still, because there's still like a very limited amount. So I'm curious when Liquid comes out if we're going to see that price go down quite a bit as more people get more tokens, or if it's going to like run up a little bit, because still the macro isn't looking great, right? Like,
no,
it seems like in the U.S.
actually looking worse.
Yeah, inflation's at the highest it's ever been. We're probably going to have a larger rate hike here soon. Food and gas are super expensive. There's like Sri Lanka, like just like declared bankruptcy, and like their people in charge stepped down. There's stuff going on in China. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot going on in the world right now where people aren't going to be fully investing all their money somewhere. So I feel like America's even counting on people to spend their savings right now on gas and food, so we can get rid of some of the money supply that's out there.
So where does that leave us with CNFTs, Subcritical?
Yeah, let's move on to CNFT.
Well, I mean, it kind of. I was actually trying to just transition because
yeah, that's fine.
I'm more curious about with this big macro picture. Will CNFTs see more paid?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, how's the volume on them and things like that? I haven't been tracking too much. I know I haven't bought any NFTs in a while now. I know there was like a bunch of Space Bud stuff going on because I guess the artist kind of took art from like quite a few different places on the online and just kind of made it into Space Buds.
So, if there was one tweet, I'll say to CJ if I'm not sure if you can find it, but it was interesting because there is some technological advancements, and I know that Argus NFT tweeted out if you find them, they collaborated with JPEG Store. Did you see that yet, Subcritical?
I didn't see anything on that. I saw JPEG Store and something about hippos or something, and people were all excited about them.
Yeah, I saw that. I don't even know the hippo story, but I shout out to Girolamo, both the original one and the one on Twitter. Girolamo on Twitter, he's his name is actually Girolamo. He told me, but I swear to God. So basically, he sent me this story, and it was about Argus NFT, and he sent me it, and it was probably the most interesting story, in my opinion, because I just did an interview with the founder of Argus. So, you know how people copy paste JPEGs and put them under a different policy ID and try to sell them on recently listed and scam people?
Mhm.
So Argus is machine learning AI that will essentially, so it's photo based, it's not text based, so it can recognize photos. And the background of the guys behind Argus is interesting, where like they were working in the field with, I believe, Amazon, recommended, products based on the, like a photo that is similar to maybe a product, right? So they could recommend different products that are of the same genre and whatnot. So they built this machine learning API that will detect fake project or counterfeit artworks. So that way, as soon as you click on the fake space bud, let's say, or the fake Clay Nation, the listing will have a big warning on it, and it'll say this has been detected to be a fake or a scam, and you can still buy it, but the big warning kind of shows up, so that way people don't just arbitrarily click to buy the thinking that it's a real space bud. I thought that was a really cool advancement that we are definitely due for, man.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Because I feel like a lot of these platforms, like especially like Cnft.io and like JPEG Store, have made so much money off of just fees and things like that, that it's like not seeing any innovations to me is just like, okay, what like what is going on here with all the money you've taken in?
Dude, I think it was 3D Kiwi or somebody was messaging me that it's a developer, and I remember they were explaining how Vassal will allow us all to basically, from our wallet, create a listing. So in other words, there's this way to now build, or like from our wallets, send an NFT to like our own customized smart contract. And if somebody sends the proper amount of ADA to that smart contract, then it just swaps the NFT, and then I get the ADA, let's say. And if they don't send the right amount, then it just, the ADA doesn't, the transaction doesn't go through. So the person doesn't lose their money for sending the wrong amount of ADA. And it would be a peer-to-peer way to do trustless and permissionless like listings.
Yeah, because as of right now, it's weird. Like, right, it's decentralized yet somewhat centralized still too, because you have to use all these like platforms to actually, make your thing go through. And technically, they could change any code in there if you didn't know. Like one day, JPEG Store could just go in, turn all their code malicious, and you go to there and everything's just gone. Like they could. like,
well, I worry for marketplaces, because in my opinion, I love the marketplaces. These were entrepreneurs that built these amazing UIs and probably quit their jobs, like most of these people that are working on marketplaces, to make a product for the CNFT community. So I'm definitely not like anti marketplaces, but what I do think they need to do is pivot and not go extinct, because once this feature gets rolled out, and if there's a way to if there's a way to kind of aggregate the data, so that way we have discoverability. And I'm not sure what the monetization angle would be. Maybe it is paying like a 1 ADA fee to that aggregator of data, and we're all listing our own NFTs. I mean, that's a pretty big deal, dude. Like that could be a market disruptor.
Yeah, if you could just throw it out there and anybody could find it on chain that like these are the ones for sale, be very interesting.
Yeah, so I wonder if marketplaces are already thinking about this to pivot. It is interesting.
Yeah, I don't know.
But another thing too that's interesting to me is there's these blue chip CNFTs that were like people were buying for $7,000 floor price for a space bud, for example, right? Like a few months, like not a few months ago, but like there was a point where that's kind of how much they costed. Um, since then they've gone down considerably, and they're like half off. And that to me is interesting, right? Like that at one point this year, it was common sense to take a to make an investment that large, and now it's like half off, right? And it's like, I think that one could argue there's an opportunity there for blue chips, and then one could argue that we could see more pain and maybe to hold off, and maybe there is upside for some of these quote unquote blue chips, but at the same token, it's like if we see more pain, where do you see that?
I'm curious what you think. Do you think it's people selling for losses, or people who had a ton of them just selling because they need profit now? Like they just need some money.
Well, I think I go off my personal experience, which is horrible because I know for a fact I don't do things most people do, and sometimes that's to my own detriment. Um, so I think at times it's probably smart to sell for a loss, man. I think people are doing that. I know for a fact people have done that because with Space Buds, I was talking to Blake, CNFT Blake, and he was articulating that he sold his Space Bud because he could sell it at a loss, wait for the drama of what was going on with the art to kind of come to a conclusion. And because he had a rarer Space Bud, he could buy back in, but he could take the tax loss. So I saw that and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But at the same token, man, I mean, the ADA price for even Space Buds isn't that far off from what it was. It's just ADA's gone down in value. So I don't know if we're seeing a huge sell-off of NFTs. I would argue that we might not be. We might just be seeing people valuing ADA as one ADA still. And that to me in itself is ridiculously interesting. I don't think it's more people are selling. I could be wrong. I think it's actually just the opportunity has gotten cheaper.
Yeah, I can see that.
But I think the question on people's minds is, will it continue to get cheaper?
Oh yeah, definitely everybody's thinking that, because I think a lot of people are still skeptical to keep buying a ton of ADA. They're skeptical to buy in on any like projects, obviously, because they've just been going down and down and down. I still feel like on Twitter, I see the most people are like, they're bullish on Maladex, which hasn't even released their token yet. They're bullish on World Mobile Token, which does have a token out there. And I think their price is finally settled around like what, like 20 cents or something? I don't know. I haven't looked at it for a while. But I mean, when it first got listed on the exchange, it was like around like 75 cents. So it's come down quite a bit also. I mean, obviously everything has come down quite a bit. But yeah, like what are people going to do? Are they going to get in on projects? It doesn't seem like it. Even with the Valsa hard fork, I think people I've talked to are still hesitant to even like, they don't want to miss a pump if people do start buying stuff after the Valsa hard fork, but they also don't want to take that risk of more loss at this point. Right? Because who knows? We could go down another 90%. Who knows?
There was a podcast I was listening to, the All In podcast, and it was funny how they were memeing the Warren Buffett saying, yeah, it's, you just got to buy when there's blood in the streets. And they were talking about how nobody usually has money left when there is blood in the streets. So it is kind of funny. Now, this to me, though, wasn't something completely not obvious, this whole, downturn of crypto. I think I think there was a few, like I was listening to BitBoy in early 2021, and I remember in mid to late 2021, he was still kind of inferring we could see maybe like this, kind of sideways action for crypto after 60K Bitcoin, and then maybe a huge pump again. And there was a few YouTubers saying that, and that narrative, even Pomp, I believe, said some similar things. So I think that kept a lot of people in. But if we just looked at what happened when they raised interest rates for the first time, I think that kind of sealed the fate of the crypto market for a bit. It's not like the innovation in tech changed. I mean, the only thing that happened was when things did go down, stress tests happened. So you saw liquidations, and you saw problems with liquidations from Solana all the way to UST. So it was interesting watching all that.
Yeah, definitely, I agree with that too. I mean, it's all been downhill since they started doing that with the rates. Because obviously, when they were printing money and they lowered the interest rates super low, everybody was, buying things up and just spending money everywhere. And now at this point, everybody's gotten a lot more conservative. But obviously, like when it comes to stocks, like people are still buying. Like, there's still people who have 401ks and things like that. So every paycheck, there's money buying up stocks, like no matter what. But I feel like with crypto, there isn't that much demand with people's 401ks and stuff like that from actual work. So we don't have that kind of like buyers just buying weekly to kind of prop up the price a little bit more, because it only seems like in the big downturn. So what, like I'm guessing like maybe the big baby boomers who are about to retire right now are the ones that are just like been capitulating and actually selling off to like get into low risk bonds and things like that, or whatever they want to do, so they can survive the next 5 years if we're like in a recession right now or whatever.
I think what's funny about collectibles, because that again, man, like where does that leave us with CNFTs? Because like what I guess I'm saying too is when we look at if they keep if money keeps getting devalued, for example, then you're going to see people, I guess, invest into things outside of the system or essentials like commodities, for example, and maybe even assets. But where it gets interesting is CNFTs are not really an essential. It's kind of like we all saw this big phenomenon of crypto punks go to like $400,000. And what is the true valuation of a Cardano blue chip when we like, is that going to repeat itself? Is that going to happen again? I don't know. It's interesting. It's like, will that replicate itself, or will we see something like Clay Nations maybe hit 30,000 US dollars instead of like 200,000, even if Cardano flips Ethereum? Like, is that a phenomenon, or is that to be expected? It's super interesting to me, and I believe it comes down to what these NFT projects that are blue chips on Cardano will actually do and deliver. If they deliver something new and unique that is wicked valuable and creates some sensation, then yeah, there's definitely potential to see that phenomenon maybe again for early projects on Cardano or leading projects. But if not, I don't know, maybe we're a little bit in love, we're clouded by what happened, rather than seeing things objectively. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that, especially with a lot of people who've been around in the scene, like of CNFTs from the beginning, where they're like, no, these are the blue chips, and like nobody else can change my mind. And it's all just new. Like you can't really call something a blue chip when it hasn't even been around for barely like a year. Like you have to kind of wait and see what they deliver on, and you can't just keep assuming that the project you're holding is going to do well. Especially like you're saying, if like new innovations come out with Fossil and Lucid and things like that, maybe people won't even care anymore. They don't want to own one of those old collectors yet. Maybe that'll be like 5 to 10 years down the line that people are actually like, oh yeah, remember these things? They're great now. While everyone's moved on to other things. So I don't know. I feel like with collector's items, you probably know more about that stuff than I do. I've just never been much of a collector in the first place.
CJ, man, do you collect NFTs?
I do not have that big of a collection. I do have a few CNFTs, but I'm really waiting for some CNFTs that have a lot of 3D value. I'm a big fan of 3D projects and anything that adds utility. Granted, working with Reach and Metaverse stuff, I am a little biased towards anything that is Metaverse related.
No, I completely agree. I'm actually in the same camp in a way. I think that there's a lot of utility to be unlocked on the 3D. The one thing I would argue for some of the projects that have had the opportunity to experience, I guess, earliness slash just being able to build a community slash having good leadership is you look at Clay Nation, and when I look at Clay Nation, I don't see it as, oh, it's just, these founders that started this project. I kind of see it more as like an ecosystem. As I've been talking to, I had the chance to talk to Brobot, the mod from Clay Nation, like the OGest of mods. And, it's funny hearing from him and some other players, like, what Clay Nation is it's truly like an ecosystem. So now that it's kind of like this ecosystem, sure, one could argue that, a company that has 40 people in it, yeah, okay, maybe that's better than, an NFT project that has 10 people in it. But if you look at, like, if you have an NFT project being led by 10 people, but if you look at it like, wait a second, this is like an ecosystem, and there might be 300 people in this ecosystem that can contribute to building it, that have skills. That to me is interesting. It's like this formless, Dowish company in a way. So I don't know if that can propel something like Clay Nation to reach just new heights in ways that we haven't experienced. I think it definitely could. It just depends on the serendipity, I guess, of like what happens next. But that's one take that I find super interesting about these collectibles. That's maybe different than traditional collectibles. So that's a new variable to look at.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think we've covered like quite a few topics. I don't know how long CJ can stick around or whatever.
I'm here as long as you guys need.
All right. Finals. So Subcritical.
Yeah.
What's the most interesting thing that you've seen this past week?
The most interesting thing I've seen this past week, like in general or on Cardano or.
Come on. I mean on Cardano, bro. I mean, you could. I don't know if you see something interesting in real life. Like, obviously, you might have seen something pretty. If it's that interesting, feel free to bring it up.
But, no. So yeah, I feel like I haven't seen a lot of innovation come out from like Sunday Swap, but they did announce that they're have some governance stuff coming out here soon. And I know they've been reaching out to lots of projects to kind of get them on board. So I don't know how big this governance thing is that's coming out, and if it'll have any competition with Liquid. I know they have their own model of governance that they were working with ADAO on. So I'm curious what they actually have to release. Have you heard anything about it?
No, this is all news to me, so I'm super interested.
Yeah, so I know they're going to use this governance for their voting. It's going to be Sunday Swap token holders that are going to be able to vote on these things. And they should be releasing info here soon. They won't give a date yet. So we'll see. Maybe they'll have a pretty cool way of actually doing governance.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So we'll keep our tabs on that, and we'll bring that to you next time that we do one of these, kind of get an update on that. CJ, what's the most interesting thing that you've seen recently in the Cardano ecosystem? I'll preface.
Okay, I was going to say, because if it's outside the Cardano ecosystem, I actually have a funny one.
Well, hey, you could do both too.
I will say in the Cardano ecosystem, I was actually going to talk about the Argus thing you mentioned. That's probably the coolest thing I've seen recently.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of that. I love anything that adds some security, especially on some of those pieces that it's really easy for people to be dishonest on. And I think one of the benefits of blockchain is the how easy it is to kind of look into and drill in and follow the transactions back. I think that adds great security and more things that you can kind of track and not track from a sense of like Big Brother looking at it, but being able to know where your stuff's coming from. I think is really important. I will say the cool thing or the weird thing I saw in real life is my roommate put out a bird feeder this past week, and it has attracted everything but birds. So I looked out there the other night, and there was a family of 3 raccoons climbing up on this bird feeder, trying to figure out how to get into it. And I had to go out like an old woman in the old movies, chasing them off with a broomstick.
Oh, dude, yeah, raccoons are like the dude. Those things will like you gotta kind of keep those out, man, because once they get familiar with your land, I mean, they will stay. They are squatters.
Yeah, they did not. I got within like 2, 3 feet of them, and they were just looking at me like, "What do you want? This is my bird feeder now."
Damn, man, dude. So I'll just chime in too on it's amazing what Argus is going to continue to do, by the way. That's not the whole extent. They want to do that for all content that is, NFTs. So you can imagine what that means. But the one thing I'll say is I heard this concept today. I was interviewing the CEO. I believe, I don't know if this is the official title, but he's like the founder, co-founder, I guess. There was two, if I have that right, of Virtua. And I was interviewing Jawad, man, and it was so interesting. So, like, this is the concept, right? It's called game remixing. So, essentially, what they're what they've built is super fascinating. They've built a kind of a framework where if they release the API of a game and landowners can basically implement that on their land, now what they are going to allow these kind of landowners to do. So think about projects and creators. Not only will you be able to remix the game in terms of customizing its look and feel, but also the gameology and the incentives. So if you have a laser tag, game, I guess, you can make in your dead pixels, you could actually incentivize the winners to win like 5 or 10 ding per round, let's say. You could also change the guns to have like a customized look, maybe like have a dead pixel on the guns, but you could also even remix the game itself. I think this isn't going to come for a while, they said, but they have a lot of the framework built out for the customizing the look and feel. I'm not sure if they have it all ready to release. I think what they want to do is start with one game and then slowly, allow the different layers of customization. But to me, this is amazing because if you can customize the gameology as well, then you're basically A/B testing a mini game. And Fortnite was, Jawad said this, Fortnite was not supposed to be this big giant thing. It was kind of like more of just a little experiment. But imagine if you could take one mini game that's professionally done, release it to the community, and have like hundreds of different iterations from the look, the feel, the incentives, and the gameology. I mean, the ecosystem will be able to now just put out like 100 different versions of the game and like A/B test it and figure out which one is like the best. And then people will probably copy and it could just like you guys could probably see how that cycle is vicious in terms of iterating and continuing to build. I just thought that was a really interesting concept.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I mean that reminds me too, like Steam back in the day, and like Counter-Strike was just kind of like a mod somebody built, and then look how like that game just blew up and turned into something like, like these smaller games that people create can just turn into like larger things. That is pretty cool if there'd be a lot of mini games that just kind of grew into their own thing.
Yeah. CJ, any final comments on that?
Oh, just I love the idea of giving people more opportunity to create things, and I think the more minds you have on things, kind of like what we were talking about earlier with Clay Nation and it being a community, is when you've got communities building, you'll have more ideas than if you had like just 10 people in a company putting it together.
Yeah, man, it's interesting, but I think that's so that's the first one of the should we call it Jcritical or joking around? There's a little
yeah,
bit.
we should probably have a different name for it, especially yeah. I'll talk after the recording. We'll talk, but yeah, we'll figure something out. Yeah, crypto and subcritical.
Did you look up Jcritical? Did something weird come up on the internet or something?
Oh no, it's just technically that's our like special name to get in this room, so you don't want to give that out, man.
That's secret. Okay, we can change that real quick.
But now we got to change it, Jay.
Oh shit. Dang. Yeah, man, there's way too many inside jokes already around that. I was gonna figure it out anyways eventually.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
All right, so that's a wrap. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take
Yeah,
care.
thanks everyone.